Well, for more on Youth Day commemorations, we're joined by a young panel this evening. We're joined in studio by Action SA's Patience Edward, the DA's Yulene Bornman, and MK Party Sipesihle Sibande, and representing SASCO, closely aligned to the ANC, is Demian Mokansi, who joins us via video link. Keen to get your thoughts as well on our discussion, what it is that really needs to be the focus for these young political partakers as they contribute to their own political parties and shape policy for a future that they will be living in. Send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 or give us a call on 010-594-6010. Guys, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear what you guys think. You know, we speak so much to your mother bodies, right, of your organizations, and really great opportunity to get the thinking of the young people in the organization, how you feel about how your mother body is contributing to things. So I'm going to start with you, Patience, and then we'll work our way down the line. You listen to just some of the commentary that, you know, even in some of the clips that we've played, you know, we haven't acted on the promise that was made in 1976. The promise of 1994 is not complete. Young people need to be at the forefront. I wonder if those words resonate as real for you as someone who is involved in politics at such a young age. Yeah. And when you think about 1976, is that something that resonates with you?
Thank you again for having me. I would say with 1976 Youth Day in general, feels like a bittersweet moment. It feels like a moment where we had young people back in 1976 that fought for the future that they wanted. It's almost 50 years, and we're yet to see the vision that we want. We're yet to see the future that we want. That's through employment, that's through education. So listening to those words almost they feel sad. They feel from a very distant place. When you go down on the ground and you see young people suffering, you see young people that want a difference, but, you know, governments they make things like this, and they're able to speak on TV and tell us that, you know, at least, you know, we didn't get to that, but it's impacting real lives. It's impacting us, young people with no jobs. I mean, we have graduates that are graduates at home for 8 years. That shouldn't be a thing. So again, it just feels like a bittersweet moment. It just feels like, it almost feels like it's for words more than it's for actions. And those are things that need to change.
Yeah, specifically from the MK Party's point of view as the party's Youth League Deputy Coordinator. I mean, what's the discussions that you have within your party around a day like this? And really what we need to be taking out of it, especially as a party that's relatively new, and really, you know, I suppose changing the political landscape, especially in the last elections.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us, Naledi. Just a correction there. I'm the National Deputy Coordinator for the MK Students Movement.
Got you, okay.
So I think it's a very monumental day for us. The Youth League has just launched officially by our Commander General, President Jacob Zuma. So it's a very monumental day for us as a MK Party. But from a young person's perspective, I think we have clustered ourselves into various sectors. There's the MK Creatives, there's the MK Medics, there's the MK Teachers Union. So we are clustering all people, young people in particular, to participate differently insofar as change is concerned, because we do believe that you don't need to be in politics to make a change. Use it as a vehicle to, you know, outline our feelings and express how we feel about the current status quo and how we can change it. But we do feel that in every sector that you're in, that you need to change it. And we call upon the developmental financial institutions to move more than the actual rhetoric. Invest in youth initiatives, invest in every sector which youth is in. You know, I see Paul Mashatile is in Soweto and other leaders of the ANC. I mean, we've had 49 commemorations already, and it's all rhetoric. But now we're calling on government, especially this government of neoliberal unity, to walk the talk, rather, and make sure that young people get access to funding. I think that's the key highlight of the MK Party Students Movement and the Youth League. Young people should get the funding that they deserve in every sector that they're in.
Yeah. Do you know what we're going to do a little bit later is we're going to get into the how that you guys put on the table of how we improve the lives of young people. Some of them contentious issues, a lot of them perhaps bigger contentious issues in the country, like the transformational agenda. But Yulene, just talk to me about your perspective as DASO, the DA's student organization. Is there a sense that there is an opportunity for young voices such as yourselves to really make a bigger contribution to what happens in the bigger body?
100%. Thank you, Naledi. Firstly, I want to concur with my colleagues on a lot of the points that they're making. As we see today with youth, I want to say with the youth of South Africa, it's not something that is a political talking point. When we look at what we struggle with and the things that are actually what we have to bring on the table on a national level is stuff like accommodation, the NSFAS payouts, the housing issues that we see, not just with private but public accommodation as well. We're looking at things like the fact that there's student hunger, the students can't graduate, like you mentioned, patience. And when we look at all these issues in a collective, we see that sometimes I think the older generations start using it as political talking points. But it's not political talking points, it is the lived reality of the youth. And that is something that we need to remember. So within DASO and I think all of the political parties where we have youth leagues specifically, the students are hungry for change, and with change doesn't come division. And I think what is important to remember that when we start dividing, we start not conquering the actual goal. And we spoke about this beforehand, but we really are driving towards the same collective goal, and that is the freedom of the youth and the freedom of students, and not freedom in the sense that we can go and we can be rogue and radical, but freedom in the sense of economic freedom, financial freedom, accommodation freedom. These are the things that all of us are fighting for. And I want to start seeing collective spirits coming together. I want to see collective collaboration efforts to actually solve these problems on a practical level.
Yeah. Demian, I'm going to bring you in here. And I think that, Demian, this is a great opportunity for you to actually just explain also to the viewer SASCO's relationship with the African National Congress and just, you know, how closely tied that is. Also what some of the activities look like in various universities in support of the ANC, especially when you've seen the party losing power and needing to form a government of national unity. Is there a sense that youth politics, or student politics, is moving away from the African National Congress, perhaps the argument being that you simply aren't being heard? What do you say to that?
Well, I think, thank you very much. And I think the first thing one would say is I definitely would have loved to be there in the studio. But I think as a student, these are the realities that we face, that sometimes when opportunities come, you can't take them because at the end of the day, there are finances that need to be involved. But I think if one were to explain SASCO, first of all, we are a student organization that exists to champion the aspirations of young people. And what we could say in terms of our relationship with the ANC, definitely we are in an alliance with the ANC, and that alliance follows what we call a CC approach. So the CC approach would be we complement and we also contradict. So where the ANC is doing quite well, we tend to complement them, and where the ANC is not doing okay, we contradict. And you'd see that with the amount of activism that we do, and somebody would question to say, why so much activism? That's because we at the end of the day take ourselves as an independent organization, and when there's an opportunity to act, we definitely act. But I think it's important also in the moment that we are in to say the issue of the 1976 should not only be something that we remember. The biggest thing that they were fighting for was barrier of access to education, and that still exists even today. Issues of application fees, barriers, registration fees, residence registration fees, deposits to enter into different private accommodation. So as much as Afrikaans was a barrier then, in the present day, class, financial capacity is a barrier. Similar to the fact that I could not be there, it speaks to the barriers that we still face as students, even in the present day.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the issues around how we start to solve some of these problems. Basically, you've talked about, us needing to see access to funding. That's one issue. But let's get into the sort of policies that we need to be writing as we move forward Do we continue with the transformational agenda? Or is it that versus growth, which seems to be quite the divisive conversation in South Africa, and one that's going to impact these young people very much. So I will continue with the discussion after the break, but we're taking your call, 010-594-6010. Join us in a moment. Welcome back. Well, we continue to commemorate Youth Day, and we're speaking to various political formations, but not their mother bodies. We're talking to the youngest of their voices, youth politicians and the students in politics as well. Keen to get your WhatsApps on 0721 105584. Perhaps you have a question for these young activists, or give us a call on 010-594-6010. You know, perhaps not a question, but even some, thinking points for them to take forward as they go back to speak to their own political parties, hoping, of course, that they're being heard. Let's take a look at the WhatsApps, though, that have come in this evening from our viewers. As Carlos says, this day has turned into a day of sloganeering by the corrupt political elite. The problems of crime and illegal immigration will not be dealt with. We can't expect the corrupt government to solve our issues. We must rise up and remove the cancerous government. Skalo, thanks for that. Msongelwa Kumalo says, Youth Day is treated by the government as if it's an ANC event instead of a national day. I think it's wrong. No political party should display its regalia at events of this nature, as none of them can claim credit for it. A very interesting perspective there. Msongela, thank you so much for that. Piri and Alex says, young people will unfortunately not change the status quo. They get sucked into the daily body politics and end up doing exactly what mother bodies do. That is corruption and selfishness. The best way is to support apolitical youth NGOs. Piri, thank you so much for sending in that WhatsApp. I know you saw that one by Piri. Yulene, and you wanted to say something to that.
Yeah, firstly, there's nothing like being apolitical. If you live in South Africa, you are not apolitical. That is a fact. And I think when it comes to that young people won't change the status quo, I've got an interesting perspective as someone who stood for SRC and ran in the elections at my University of Pretoria. I stood as an independent candidate. I didn't run under DASO. And I think the importance of that is that we are creating political rat races. We are creating people that want to play a political game and push agenda and push manifesto. We're not creating leaders that want to govern and want to change, because that's much harder, because then you need to have your own set of values, you need to have your own vision, and that is something that challenges the person on its own. And I think that is something that the youth lacks. We need more leaders that want to lead in the capacity of, we have a vision for South Africa, we have a collaborative vision for South Africa, and we are tired of pushing narratives that divide us. Therefore, I think we need to see more independent leaders. However, with that being said, we need the political parties to push a narrative that seems to be moving away from division, where we can be a collaborative effort of the MK and the DA and the EFF and whoever wants to become part of a certain specific campaign. For example, Fees Must Fall in 2016. That was very, 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 I think, monumental within the universities. But that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the collaboration of various political parties coming together, working towards a collaborative goal. That is what we need, and that is how we're going to change the status quo. Yeah,
very interesting. I see some nods, actually. So look at that. Nods
That's
across the political landscape of young people.
Glad.
Well, we're going to hear from more of our panelists, but let's take a call. Sengwayo is in Soweto. Sengwayo, good evening.
Evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
I'm good, man. I understand we are each and every year celebrating 16 June. But now, as youth of South Africa, we need to stand up and understand the system of our education. Because from the educational system, it's a bad structure whereby you are taught to go and seek for employment rather than to go and look for ways to employ yourself.
Yeah.
So the system, sorry?
I'm listening to you, Sengwayo, yes.
Yeah. So the system that we must seek as youth of South Africa should be the one that changes the life of the generation that has to come after us in a way that we must not for the future think more of joining political parties, but stand on the ground and look for employment ourselves. Because if you can check the youth of China, for example, compared to the youth of Africans, we are a little bit away from the goal which we are seeking. So I think we need to revisit that angle of educational system, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that's a very valuable contribution, Somaya. Thank you so much for calling. I'm going to ask some very targeted questions, and if you'd like to respond to what we've heard from our viewers, you're more than welcome to do so. But Patience, here's what we heard from the Deputy President today. Yes. He talks about how we have over 3 million young people that are not in education, in any form of training, or in any sort of form of employment. I mean, that's a desperate place to be in for a young person. And then the conversation around this time on a day like this is the race relations comes in, the transformation agenda, the balancing out of inequality. What do you say to the debate around the transformative agenda? Do we continue that? BEE, for instance, do you as a young person think about that and speak to other young people and say, well, this is a policy that's going to work?
Yeah, I think when it comes to things like the BEE, we need to remember that they were made to sort of benefit us, but that vision has been completely lost. If we're being honest with ourselves, we're no more seeing the benefit the way we want to see it. I think that's why it's important, like the caller was mentioning, something like education, so that it's not dependent on, you don't fall back on the BEE, because that vision is completely lost. It's not the same way that it came in. It's no more as fresh as it came in. Now it's, covered by corruption. It's covered from all sorts of things. You will find companies where the owner is not even a black person, but they will front with a black person just to get the benefit of the BEE, which completely loses meaning for companies that actually want to benefit from it, if, that's the thing. So again, I think even just commenting on the caller's comment, when it comes to things like education, when it comes to things like funding, so that young people can stand on their own 2 feet. We need funding to come back up. I think my colleague here was talking about things like funding. Those are things that need to be brought up again for young people. We need to be very serious. I know we have things going around now like the SPAZA grant. Those things need to be selected for young people. Young people need to have a portion of that so that we're not falling back on systems that maybe don't work for us anymore. That's why we need to also be involved in policies that we can now reframe, because systems that were working for us 30 years ago, it's just not working for us right now. And it has, we need to just move with the times. So I personally think that we just need to stop moving with the times. We need to be more involved in those policies. We need to see what is going to work for us right now. Yeah. What policies can we create at this moment? Because those things don't work for us. We've seen that.
Specifically, your views on that?
Well, I think I agree with my colleague here, partially. I think growth and transformation goes hand in hand. I never thought I'd agree with the president's statement when they issued that last week, Monday. But I think growth and transformation goes hand in hand, because the apartheid government, of course, used affirmative action to empower their people. Of course, the model has been used effectively of broad-based black economic empowerment. But I think it is imperative that government does address the issues of the oppressed, the marginalized, the economically excluded. And from an academic perspective, it goes back to the issues of the missing middle. I think if government, government's commitment is measured through the funding. I always reiterate the issues of funding, because government did make a commitment in the last stage of the nation address and in the budget speech that they will find funding for the missing middle. But that has not been realized in this recently tabled budget by Enoch Gondongwana. So I think we should be able to say, as young academics, within broader political parties, let us sit down and have a dialogue which has practical solutions, but not a dialogue which has a budget of 700 million. I think we fundamentally reject that with the contempt it deserves, because that 700 million could be used even to fund that missing middle that we as young people are talking about. So I think those are the talking points that young people should be focusing on.
The dialogue the president saying is for us as a country to form a social compact. And I mean, a lot of this coming out of racial tensions. Demian, I'm going to come to you for this one. A lot of this sort of need for this dialogue coming out of racial tensions, the inequality, but much of it being about the social cohesive discussion. Do you think that, especially for young people such as yourselves, that race is still a central issue, even as you talk about inequality, that race for your generation is still a central issue 31 years into democracy?
Well, I think one thing I can say is that to a certain extent, there are people in this country that don't want to be honest with the realities that we face. And just like any other system, there are challenges, but you don't throw away a system when there are challenges. Today, we are speaking about the issue of doctors which are unemployed, but the reality is that one thing about that system, it tells you that most of those doctors you'll find are probably, black doctors, which in the past would not have that challenge. So there is that transformation where you find that we look into that in universities when we are absorbing students into the terrain. So if you are to say in South Africa that no, it's 30 years now, then we can throw away, these affirmative actions, you're really not being honest. If I were to ask you, how many, if you were to look at race, majority of black students are the ones that come from quintile 1 schools, quintile 2 schools, quintile 3s. The other races, you start picking them up in quintile 4, quintile 5. So the blacks and the coloreds, you find them very low in the low quintiles, schools without proper infrastructure, schools with one textbook where the teacher is the one that is on the board. So people are not being honest. And I think that's the issue that we have in this country, where people don't want to be honest. You can't erase 100 years of apartheid with just 30 years. We have a long way to go. And I think as much as we are embracing the Rainbow Nation, it would work well if we are all being honest in the table. A lot of work still needs to be done for black students. And for as long as majority of them are still coming from these underprivileged environment, it tells you that affirmative action is still very much necessary in this country. And I think a national dialogue of that nature might help. I agree with my colleague from the MK, maybe 700 million is a lot of money for the dialogue, but the dialogue is necessary so that we can go back and look at the realities which are still confronting us. And I was just showing you a highlight of some of those realities that we are speaking about.
Yeah, and you paint a very clear picture of that inequality and how it impacts young people. What does that conversation sound like in the Democratic Alliance Student Organization?
Well, firstly, I think something that we all stand for, especially DASO, is inclusivity. And we have this notion that there's no student left behind. But I do think it is still important to look at something in the proportionality. I think it's important to see that in South Africa, there is a minority group, there is a majority group. And when we look at how people are graduating and how many people are graduating, it is important to remember that there are systems in place. For example, NSFAS, for example, public accommodations that are sponsored by universities or not sponsored, where still children need to get bursaries to be able to graduate. Those systems that are in place, especially governmental systems like NSFAS, they are not working. So much of the time where you see there's discrepancies and where there is discrimination, marginalization, where there are students struggling, it is mostly because systems are not working. So from my point of view, and I think DASO's point of view especially, is that we want those systems to work again, which calls for accountability. And something that we want to do is we want to keep these leaders, especially government leaders, accountable for what they said they want to achieve for the youth, for them saying that they want the students to be graduated, they want the students to receive the funding that they need, to receive safe student accommodation. They need to show us, because at this stage, the systems that they have put in place to be able to have these things practically play out for students are not working. I mean, for example, NSFAS, one thing that we need, that I think, and DASO also thinks, is actually crucial when it comes to student accommodation is, firstly, keep NSFAS accountable to have the payouts up front to students for accommodation. And secondly, NSFAS and student accommodation needs to be nationally regulated, not regulated by one specific body like the university or NSFAS. It needs to have national regulation so that we can keep these people accountable.
Right. So we're going to take this a little bit further, and I'm going to keep going, targeted themes with you guys on the other side of this short break. And we also will be getting contributions from our viewers. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition, as we commemorate Youth Day with young leaders from various political parties talking to us about their contributions within their own structures and certainly what they want to be seeing as priorities for their generation in our country moving forward. But we're taking calls as well. Let's hear from Pat in Katlehong. Pat, good evening. Thanks for calling.
Good evening. How are you, ma'am?
Well, sir, talk to us. We're listening.
Good. Ma'am, I'm from Ekurhuleni. I just want to contribute. I want to caution all political parties that up until young people are made to believe that they can also employ, there will always be a start. You know, there will always be a start. There will always be a part of the statistics. Young people must opt to businesses and employ because no one is going to employ them. They must actually start now to think about getting into businesses so that they can employ each other.
Right.
Otherwise, this thing every year will be talking about it and about it. So young people must just know that the solution is that they take over businesses and start to employ. Yes.
Yeah, Pat, that's a very strong point. And in fact, we heard earlier from Spesihle saying, give us the funding to be able to do that. But let's hear Kabelo in Pretoria. Kabelo, good evening.
Evening. Yes, thanks for the opportunity and greetings to your guests. Yes, my comment is around one. In terms of youth development, the NYDA, you cannot be bestowed with all the responsibilities on youth development because we need to create another wing that will be able to create opportunities of youth mainstreaming opportunities and how we can resolve the challenges around your Section 21 entities, your youth NGOs, your youth cooperatives, then able to get opportunities within NYDA alone. But with another wing that can be created to assist what NYDA is doing and also to mainstream youth development across the private sector, government, and lastly, I'm worried about political parties not creating or setting aside budget for youth development in municipalities at the provincial level. It's only KZN government that is doing that, but other provinces are not providing, and your youth advisory panels are not functional. So the issues around youth development needs serious and robust approach by youth-owned entities. Youth solutions need youth development practitioners to resolve. Thanks a lot.
Kabelo, thank you so much. A really nice contribution also about bringing those youth development programs to the ground. But let's start moving towards wrapping it up. Patience, what needs to be prioritized?
I think personally, young people need to step forward in the space of politics specifically. It doesn't mean that you must choose a political party itself and run with it. You can be independent. It could be just getting the knowledge of the policies that are being made so that when it comes to topics like this and discussions, you have your input too. You know what type of policies need to be changed. You know the errors. I mean, I can give an example with myself. I personally started politics when I was 17, and it wasn't because of politics. It was because I wanted to help people. And I chose a political party, and I stood by it. And I stood to help people in that political party as much as I could, making myself, I think, when I turned 18, the youngest candidate on the local election list, which is something wow, because it was like, how did somebody young get into politics? I'm studying computer science, something outside of the space of politics, but I'm passionate about people. And I really urge young people to be passionate about themselves, be passionate about your neighbor as a young person. All these things that we talk about funding, all these things that we talk about education systems, that can only be solved again. I think the young man or the man that was talking now was young people's solutions can make young people, can solve young people problems. So that's the only way things are going to happen. Please, let's start educating ourselves. Let's be progressive in how we see politics right now, because I think that's the only way. We can't have old people make decisions for us.
So at the heart of it, it's asking young people to have active citizenry, especially.
Well, I think I entirely agree. Matuke, nothing for us without us. We are going to inherit South Africa. We're going to govern this country. But equally, we must make sure that we urge, see, we are 3 political parties besides the MK. If South African political parties are serious about the inclusion of young people, let young people get inside the PR candidate list for local government. Let young people become mayors for district, local municipalities. Let young people become CEOs of major developmental, financial, or whatever entities within the state. Let young people participate in different multifaceted state institutions to show that as young people, we are ready for government. We have all the capacities that is needed to run government. And lastly, I would like to say that we must reiterate the call. President Zuma in 2018 in the ANC's elective conference pronounced free education. This is the year of picket lines. And as the MK party and the MK student movement are open for business, let us conscientize young people. And this is the vehicle for black liberation.
Yeah, brilliant. Yulene?
No, I agree entirely. And I think my colleagues are one of the few youth leaders that really see South Africa moving forward towards unity. And I think if there's a message to the youth that I want to get out there, and I think importantly, I think you, Patience, you said that you don't need to be part of politics to make change. I think you caring about people and caring about your community and how things are functioning within your community or your university is enough for you to stand up and speak up for what you need, because we will not know what you need if you don't come to us and tell us what you need or be the person to bring the solution. Yeah. I think we look at a problem very quickly and don't bring a solution, and it's fun to do that and jump on a political party's back and sing and dance and say, yes, we want this problem to be solved, but we don't bring solutions. So one thing that I think the key focus points that we need to look at is firstly skills development. I think the youth needs to be developed in skills, not just with entrepreneurship, but also with knowledge as to know what is going on in politics, what is going on in governments, and how do I get change? What does it mean to have policy considerations? What does it mean to amend the policy considerations? Right. What do I need to do to be able to create this change? Because unfortunately, we work in a society where we need policies to be pushed through, but we also need people to question those policies and be able to advocate for change. Because if we sit back and we say, well, this is just how it is and this is just how it's been, there will be no change. And as you say, we're inheriting South Africa. We're the future leaders of today. We can't be future leaders on the back of previous leaders. We need to bring change, new policies, and I think that's basically
so start making your contributions now. It's very strong. Damien, before I let you go, your priorities that we need to be taking out of this conversation.
I think just inviting our colleagues, SASCO is working just like the Freedom Charter on the Student Charter that has got 6 pillars that speaks to access to education, that speaks to transformation of the curriculum. So it would be nice if our colleagues can participate in that, because we don't only want it to be a SASCO thing, but it should be a thing that everyone embraces. The issue of expropriation. There are buildings in Hillbrow which are centers of violence. Same, you find these buildings in Durban and other CBDs. Those are the first buildings that must be expropriated. So when people are thinking expropriation, they should not only be narrow and think about their farms are going to be taken. Expropriation is working in international countries all over the world. We must expropriate those buildings and change them into living student accommodations for students. And I think that's just some of the things as solutions that we are proposing as SASCO. Thank you.
We could talk for a very long time, and I must tell you, I was saying to my guest a little bit earlier that, obviously I'm no longer youth, but I remember my generation talking a lot about, whether or not politics was interesting and if it was better to go into civil society. But I think you guys have certainly restored the confidence of our political future in the country. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Patience Edward of Action SA, Yulene Bornman of DASO, that's the Democratic Alliance, of course, Espesihle Sibande, who is with Mkhonto Wesizwe students, as well as Damien Mukansi SASCO, an alliance member, they say, of the African National Congress. You're still watching News 3 p.m., the late edition. When we come back, your headlines. Stay with us.